really excited to be here today. And first, I want to thank you for mentioning Afghanistan in your presentation because our region is at the brink of a new war with what is happening in Afghanistan. Now, coming back to my presentation on the pandemic and challenges faced by humanism in Pakistan. The pandemic has wreaked havoc on the people of Pakistan due to the country's fragile politics, struggling economy, and unstable healthcare system. Asian Development Bank estimated that COVID-19 pandemic triggered 946,000 job losses in Pakistan. And according to media reports, an additional 2.45 million people now suffer from food insecurity. Pakistan public health system was overstretched long before the onset of the coronavirus pandemic. On average, Pakistan has one doctor for every 963 people and one hospital for every 1,608 people. According to UNDP figures, Pakistan was facing shortage of 200,000 doctors and 1.4 million nurses to cope with the crisis. The initial sources of COVID-19 outbreak in Pakistan was claimed to be the government failure to provide dignified, effective, and efficient screening, testing, and quarantine facilities to the 7,000 religious pilgrims returning from Iran. The pilgrims belong to the persecuted Shia minority religious group in Pakistan who are facing a genocide. They were blamed for spreading COVID-19, and the virus was called as Shia virus to further marginalize the already persecuted community. As I have already mentioned in many of my presentations, that because in Pakistan there is nothing as the right to be non-religious. It is not even recognized, and it can be a death sentence. Recognize oneself as non-religious can be a death sentence. Therefore, to see the situation of humanists in Pakistan, we have to see it from the lens of religious minorities and what is happening to religious minorities in Pakistan. Another reason for the COVID outbreak in Pakistan was the week-long religious gatherings of 1,250,000 followers of Islamic preaching group in a major city, Lahore of Pakistan. That event of 1,250,000 people of the Islamic preachers became a super spreader event. However, the religious leaders continuously defied the implementation of socially distant religious activities in mosques and shrines. The governments could implement the partial lockdowns for most businesses and schools, except mosques, where religious gatherings take place multiple times a day. These social and religious attitudes towards the pandemic led to a rapid increase in COVID-19 infection rates in Pakistan. The fake news about coronavirus misled the public misunderstanding of the pandemic, resulting in challenges to contain the virus, especially the rumors claiming that the government receives a certain amount of money by declaring each death due to COVID-19. It fueled the idea among some groups that the virus is a means for the government to ask for funding from the United States and other Western countries. On the onset of the pandemic, the federal government failed to counter misinformation and to educate people about the prevention of COVID-19. In fact, the Prime Minister of Pakistan played a role in spreading disinformation by calling it just a flu which will go away in a few days. And the provincial governments who were actually imposing strict lockdowns faced criticism by the federal government. Another issue is the inequitable distribution of vaccine to the developing countries like Pakistan, which has also affected its ability to counter the pandemic. Like many other developing countries, Pakistan lacked pharmaceutical infrastructure and purchasing power. Thus, it relies on its allies and other humanitarian programs to get vaccination support. Pakistan is among the very few countries that has allowed the private sector to import and sell vaccine. So many people in Pakistan have to buy vaccine despite of knowing that what the pandemic is doing to everyone. Amidst various conspiracy theories, vaccine hesitancy also remains a critical challenge for Pakistan. The country has been facing a similar hesitancy for decades in case of polio vaccination as well. Gallup Pakistan found that 49% of Pakistanis were hesitant to get vaccinated against COVID-19. The factors perceived for hesitation include, but are not limited to, poor quality of vaccine, hardline religious beliefs, perception of vaccine by the clergy as infidel vaccine, rumors about the active virus within the vaccine itself, and the theory that the vaccine are a Western conspiracy to eradicate Muslim populations. The conspiracy theories around the COVID-19 vaccine are widespread on popular media and reach to millions of Pakistanis. For example, a renowned political analyst in Pakistan claimed that the COVID-19 vaccine has nanochips to control human bodies through 5G internet. An ex-foreign minister of Pakistan also made similar disinformant comments, accusing the United States of inventing the coronavirus in the UK labs and then transferring it to China for spread. In Pakistan, social media feeds such conspiracies about the COVID-19 vaccine every day. This built a public narrative defying the reality of COVID-19 virus and denial of vaccine safety and efficacy. And unfortunately, Pakistan, being a non-secular, a religious state, has failed to use science and humanism to counter the disinformation about vaccine and disinformation about the virus itself. In Pakistan, even during the global pandemic, discrimination on the basis of religion continues. From referring to the virus as Shia virus, to requiring Christians to recite the Kalma to receive aid, to denying ration bags to the Hindu communities, to Hindus in some communities, are few examples of faith-based discrimination in Pakistan. It was reported that some individuals of the welfare organizations refused to distribute food rations to the non-Muslims, even if it was not an organizational policy. In the past 2 years, there has been a rise of religious extremism in Pakistan. The pandemic has been used as an excuse to further shrink civic spaces in Pakistan, to curb freedom of expression, and to curb democratic parliamentary processes. The persecution of religious minorities by the non-state has increased after the pandemic in the form of forced conversion of minor girls, destruction of religious places of religious minorities, target killing, and mob lynching over the accusations of blasphemy. The new wave of Talibanization in the northwest of Pakistan after the Doha peace deal with Taliban, which legitimized terror groups of Taliban as legitimate political actors, is posing a new threat to non-religious, to humanist and religious minorities in the region. The blasphemy laws are used in combination with cybercrime laws, which is contributing to human rights abuses and foster an overall atmosphere of intolerance for non-religious people. Aware Girls, coming as I think I'm running out of time, so I will come shortly to what Aware Girls has been doing. Aware Girls is a young women-led organization working with young women to promote leadership skills among them so that they can act as agents of change and peace in their communities. Members of the Aware Girls have been actively working in their communities to fight the disinformation about the COVID-19 and also to spread awareness about the importance of vaccine. Aware Girls has also, during the pandemic, as there was really little attention on the human rights defender situation. So Aware Girls had been actively working with human rights defenders from Pakistan who were at risk to connect them with information and resources to help them get protected. And one of the recommendations that Aware Girls has is equitable vaccine distribution, as already mentioned by Andrew, increased international accountability and implementation of the international law, convention, and treaties for the protection of humanists and for the protection of the right to believe, and increased solidarity with humanists and support for humanists at risk. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Andrew, Giovanni, all of you for putting this together at these times. COVID-19 has put our whole planet, all of humanity to test. As expected, in our current global order, the poorer countries have been hit even harder. During these difficult times, we have also seen how the rich countries became the prime beneficiaries of the enterprise of medical science and of the scientific progress of the last 2 centuries. On the other hand, we are also seeing, unfortunately, anti-vaccine, anti-mask, anti-science movements as well, all over the world. But I guess that is a different discussion for maybe a different forum. If I get back to the topic of our panel discussion today, the humanist community in Bangladesh, my home country, unfortunately have suffered quite a bit. But if I want to talk about it, I have to start from 2014, 2015, when we all suffered a great blow to the humanist movement. As Andrew mentioned in his opening statements, many humanist activists, writers, including my husband, were literally hunted down, not only by the Islamic or religious extremists, also by the government of Bangladesh. Forget about the religious freedom. Freedom of expression as a whole has been choked to death in Bangladesh. You can be arrested or lynched or can be put in crossfire, which is like the extrajudicial killings in Bangladesh, is for just asking a simple question on social media, like about democracy or religion, or even about the basic rights of being a human being. In this situation, between the killings and the arrests in Bangladesh and the global pandemic since last year, I should say we have assembled a team and returned to the very basics. Yes, the very basics of humanism, reason, science, encourage people to think critically, like ask questions. To me personally, it is very important to understand our where we are comparing to the rest of the universe, how big the universe is comparing to our fleeting existence, and how important humanism is in our little planet, way more than ever before, compared to bigotry, superstition, nationalism, suppression, inequality. With my team, I created Think, a digital media channel, a YouTube channel for the curious. As a start, we are making videos on different topics like science, history, myth-busting, women's health, gender equality, philosophy, in Bengali, my native language, and also in English. You can check out Think Bangla or Think English on YouTube. If we can, we want to make this content in many languages of the global south. That's because our younger generations are craving knowledge that is unfortunately confined to the languages spoken only in the developed world, especially in English. There is a lot of good content in English, but very little in other languages like Bengali, Hindi, Urdu, Arabic, you name it. Don't get me wrong, there is also a lot of content. YouTube is flooded with Bengali content, but it is full of misinformation, fake news, religious, unscientific, unrealistic content, very low quality content as well. So to counter that, we have made almost 50 videos so far in last year and a half. And we are actually producing videos, publishing videos every week now in Bangla for now. And we have been getting overwhelmingly encouraging responses from our audience. You can actually check them out on our YouTube channel. People are literally saying that they could not imagine that they could see these things in their or understand or hear this in their own languages. We are bringing in all kinds of experts and scientists to discuss about different topics. So, and unfortunately, we had to abandon our studio in London because of COVID-19, and we tried to adjust at these difficult times. We are shooting from our home on Zoom, just like the meeting today. We have even made a series of videos on coronavirus. Thanks to Humanist International for sponsoring the series of videos on climate change, the most pressing issue of our lifetime. As humanists, we believe that knowledge should not be confined to the languages of only the privileged. Just like the printing press opened doors for knowledge from the religious and privileged people in the Middle Ages to everybody, today's digital media has the potential to do the same thing in all languages, in all corners of our planet, if we care or create the opportunity for everybody. Thank you.
Giovanni, and then I'm delighted to be a part of this noble missions of promoting humanism throughout the world. This time we are in Kathmandu, I guess. So happy to be pretty here. Yeah. So let me start with what we have been facing as a humanist very briefly. My colleague Dinesh pointed out, like shared with you, that what we have been doing for quite a long time, and we have been engaged in promoting humanism and science and anti-superstitious thought for quite a long time. And then, unlike in other countries, like including Pakistan and Bangladesh and India, which claims to be the largest democracy, we do not face persecution and prosecution of any kind, at least so far. So good for us that it is, from that point of view, it is easier for us to promote the idea of humanism and science and this scientific temper. But certainly we lack a certain kind of resources, human resources and financial resources. That's certainly our shortages. But we do not face, let me repeat this, persecution and prosecutions, and then no violent confrontation with people who are deeply religious. In that sense, we have a very deeply secular culture, though people are deeply religious in Nepal, but they are not violent, they are not confrontational in a violent way. So that is good for us. And then if we really have resources and then human resources, financial resources, we can do a lot on promoting humanist values. But please do not consider this as a self-congratulatory, nationalistic, jingoistic idea that I'm expressing. As a humanist, I do not believe in any of them, but this is a fact of our life, fact of Nepali society. Yeah. So yeah, having said that, let me quickly turn to what we have been facing and observing in the context of COVID disaster. So like in any other country which has adopted free market, or let me call it like liberal capitalisms. Some people call it a free market, but I prefer to call it a capitalism because we don't have a free market, we have a rigged market, and everywhere big capital, big enterprises, and big business dominate everything from economy to politics to society to your cultures and even your soul. And then in this context, what we have confronted or faced is like lack of healthcare system and lack of vaccines, lack of government planning how to rescue people when they are in trouble, like people were stuck in certain things and they could not go to home by bus or something, some other means of transportation. But government was a complete failure in that sense. So, and then who had to suffer most was the poor people, working people, people without property and money in their pocket. It's coming back again to capitalisms or liberal markets. They were actually free to do whatever they wanted to do. Government did literally, so to speak, it should not be an exaggeration, but government did practically literally nothing to help them. So that happened in India. I know that happened in Bangladesh, that happened in Pakistan. So we heard a lot about India and how people suffered, and how even in Nepal, like people walk like 200 and 300 kilometers to reach their home. That actually happened. And to my mind and to my understanding and to my analysis, like all this happened because there was deep inequality in society. And that inequality was produced by what we call free market capitalism. So this, I think, is one thing that humanists should seriously consider, rather than talking abstractly about what are the hindrances of in the process of in our humanist mission. So And I realized that I'm observing all these things. I realized that COVID actually was not a problem. What was the problem was our economic, political system and commitment. A disease like COVID seems to be a very minor, and they were not very serious. What was serious, what actually made them serious was our economic and political systems, our inequality that has been thriving in our society for like 30 years after the pushing of neoliberalisms or something like that. So this actually, I think, was the major problem. And then look at the deep division of the world. Like on the one hand, we have been talking about globalization as a sharing and deep cooperation between the nations, between people, between groups and people, all kind of things. But on the other hand, there is a deep division of wealth is extremely unequally distributed, and nations are becoming stronger militarily, economically, and there is a huge upsurge of nationalism to the extent, like we have been talking about class of civilization, that the future, it was predicted by some neoliberal thinkers in the United States, like some conservative thinkers in the United States. Okay, the future will be the class of civilization, and the class of civilization idea was pushed to us to that extent that, okay, the COVID virus, the virus was called, named Chinese virus, and that became really very popular in a country like the United States. And then many Republicans and other people actually follow that idea. Yes, so it was basically the greed of capitalist enterprises that actually prevented people from getting uh, access to the healthcare systems, because all these healthcare systems are privatized. Most of them are privatized, and government has paid very little attention in improving, in the direction of improving them, or creating new public services owned by government or a community. Oh, so that was the problem. That was the reason why we were suffering so much from COVID. Otherwise, we could have saved a lot of human lives. A lot of, like maybe 90% of them could not have died if we had good healthcare system in place. If we had, if we had a system in which people would have access to nutritious foods and oxygens and other things like that. And then we saw that a lot of people in India died because there was no oxygen in hospital and there were no beds in hospital. That pretty much happened in Nepal, but not to the extent that happened in India. Yeah, this I think was my brief observations on what is happening. And look at the division of the world. On the one hand, I said globalization is pushed so aggressively. On the other hand, nations are competing militarily and economically, not only as competitors, but as rivals, as enemy, as belligerent forces. And that was because, and there was a very little cooperation, or a negligible, or sometimes even non-cooperation between the nation to fight this pandemic. This could not have been a pandemic if nations have united together to figure out scientifically, to figure out what actually is the causes and how we can prevent people from dying. But there was a politics, there was ideology that actually intervened in this process, and that becomes decisive and dominant in determining how we should fight COVID. For example, our government did not receive or buy vaccines from China. I don't know why. Indian, actually, maybe they did not receive a lot of vaccines from China. They were not willing to receive vaccines from China. And China had already made very big progress on this direction because that was the country first hit by COVID. And some countries put diplomacy and politics and their strategic partnerships as a priority while deciding who should get vaccine and who should not get vaccine. Again, politics, again, this greedy politics, this greedy corporation politics was actually dominant. And then we were preventing from having vaccine in time, and we were preventing from creating vaccine in time, and we were preventing from having access to vaccines that were already created. Okay, my message, finally, my message to all humanists working in this direction, some people have sacrificed their life or I have sustained tortures and things like that. What I would like to appeal is, so we have to be concrete in identifying what is the force that is preventing us from promoting humanism. Like in all this, like theocracy, as Andrew rightly pointed out, theocracy was one of the problem. Even in some country, it is still the problem. But in the case of Nepal and many other countries in the world, what is that which is preventing humanism from spreading, humanism from being promoted? And as I said, we need to be very concrete in identifying the forces, which I think is this greed of capitalist system, or maybe the system that neoliberalism put in our place, and that is actually dysfunctional for millions of the people, only functional for a tiny fractions of the society. And this is being protected by many governments in India and Nepal. We pretty much have this neoliberal system because our healthcare system is, let me tell you, this is a very bad thing that I would like to share. Our healthcare system is much worse than it was during the autocratic king monarchy. So that actually pains me to tell that, but this is the fact of life, because in those times they used to build up hospitals, public hospitals, and private hospitals was a very rare phenomenon in that time. But nowadays, you see private hospitals everywhere. They do not care people when they actually need, and they did not. When there was a pandemic, they actually did not care people. They did not admit people even when they had a serious heart attack. That actually was the case in Nepal. There were several cases of that kind, and there were very limited public services, public hospitals, which actually served people in a huge amount, but they were very insufficient. And then our government actually did not buy vaccines in time because there was a huge scandal of corruptions involved in the process of buying or purchasing some vaccines from China or maybe India. And we actually were denied vaccines in time, and a lot of people died because there were no vaccines. So this actually pains, really painful to share this with you. Let me stop here because I
Thank you.
more time than I actually was assigned. Sorry about that.
Thank you very much, Dr. Prasad. That's great.
Let me talk about what happened in India, particularly during the COVID times. Of course, it didn't make any difference in the situation that I am facing because, like Dr. Narendra Dhabolkar was eliminated by assassins. That was quite some time back in 2013. It is 8 years back. We are all under threat. And right now, there is a policeman sitting below my flat with a gun. To that extent, I have to be protected from these extremist elements. And this has been happening for the past 5 years. I think that's a good sign that we have made some impact on the people. So I should be happy that I need protection, or maybe unhappy, I do not know. Anyway, the humanist community in India is facing a lot of problems, particularly because of the religious right that has come to the power. And as the usual reactions to things, the way COVID pandemic was handled is also very significant and typical of how India, the government of India has been handling these things. There is a lot of dichotomy in the way things are done. In the COVID pandemic, there has been non-science, there has been pseudoscience, and there has been bad science. Let me not go too much into bad science because sometimes it's a matter of debate. And in bad science, sometimes we go by the available evidence, which may turn out to be wrong later. So let me talk about the non-science. The non-science was displayed right when the pandemic stuck. One of the first things proposed was observe a day's shutdown, and in the evening, bang pots and pans and whatever things with which you can make a noise, and you will be cured of the pandemic. Sadly, nothing happened. 2 days later, 4 hours notice was given to a total shutdown of the country, which caused great panic. In a small place like Singapore, where you can drive from one end to the other in an hour, they gave 4 days notice for a total lockdown. But in a country like India, which is almost a continent, they declared lockdown in 4 hours. And that led to such a mass migration and confusions and all that. Later on, another measure was advised. Put off your lights and then light candles. Anyway, Going beyond that, they advise people to drink urine of the mother cow, called as Gomata, saying that that could be a preventive. So this is about the non-science. How about pseudoscience? There is a ministry called as Ayush. It is the Ministry for Alternative Medicine. Ayurveda, Yoga and Naturopathy, Unani, Siddha and Homeopathy. These are supposed to be the systems of alternative medicine which can be of use in prevention, treatment, and post-COVID handling also. And in fact, they published a book for that, how to handle these three things using the so-called alternative medicine. And the signatory number 1 in that booklet was on P.R. Krishna Kumar. He is an Ayurvedic specialist, and sadly, in October 2020, he succumbed to COVID himself. The minister for this particular branch, called as Ayush, the alternative medicine, got COVID, and he did not take any of these alternative medicines. He went and got admitted to a regular hospital. The Indian population was hit by the first wave. That was quite bad. And then there was a gap in between the two waves. And the triumphant declaration after the apparent end of the first wave was that India has conquered COVID. It's an example to the world, and blah, 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 blah. Later on, super spreader events were there. One of the largest congregations in the history of the world, called as Kumbh Mela, happened. And that led to an explosion of COVID all over the country. Elections were declared, rallies were held, and crowds and crowds and crowds. As you know, we are 1.3 billion people, and we rarely miss opportunities to crowd together. And scarce regard for physical distancing, masking, or anything else for that matter. This helped in the rapid spread of COVID, along with a variant, the Delta variant, which is now dominating all over the world. Of course, the COVID virus is an RNA virus. We do expect mutations, but we do not expect measures to cause rapid transmission of this. And that's what happened in this country out of complacency, negligence, and particularly about vaccination too. When the whole world was ordering vaccines, and India is the largest producer of vaccine in the world, and we ordered for vaccine only in February 2021. Anyway, that apart, there were so many alternative medicines proposed, like pseudoscience of homeopathy. Homeopathic sugar pills were dispensed. And imagine the Nuclear Power Corporation of India, go by my word, Nuclear Power Corporation of India distributed these sugar pills to their employees, saying that it's a preventive for COVID. They gave gooseberry jam, preserve, which they call as Chyawanprash. They gave so many things called as antivirals, not any regular antivirals, evidence-based, but what they claim as antivirals in a system of medicine called as Ayurveda. They also advise exercises, breathe like this and that and that and that. But let me tell you, all this advice was for the common poor citizen of this country. The top leadership took all precautions to see that they do not get infected, And even if they get infected, they did not go to alternative medicine. They went and got admitted to proper hospitals, got the proper treatments. So in this dichotomy, the casualties were of the common people. Oxygen shortages, shortages of hospital beds, shortage of disposal of the departed. Bodies came floating. Yeah. So this was the sorry state of affairs in this country at the peak of this second wave. Shortages of oxygen, hospital beds, and people running here and there. And again, when vaccination started, there was such hesitancy in this starting of vaccination that doses were going a begging. And this was because of a lot of publicity. Some of them said that the body develops magnetism, and people stuck coins to their foreheads and hands, arms, and showed that magnetism is developed because of vaccination. They lit bulbs, putting them on the body and saying that body generates electricity because of vaccination. And some people said that the vaccination contains ingredients which make people sterile. And with all that, the hesitancy started. And doses were going a banging, as I'm saying. Then when the second wave hit really badly, the stampede for the vaccine started. And again, as you know, shortage, vaccine shortage. In India, only 2 vaccines were allowed, and now the third one is there. And recently, the 4th one has been allowed. The only 2 ones that were allowed were the AstraZeneca or the Oxford vaccine, which is called Covishield in India. The other one was an inactivated whole virion vaccine, which is called as Covaxin in India. These were the 2. And there were shortages of these vaccines. And as a result, when the people wanted to get vaccinated, there weren't enough of them. So all these factors contributed to the bad handling of the COVID situation in this country. Despite of children being almost immune to COVID, the CFR among children being in the second decimal place, the infections being very rare, and in most of the children asymptomatic. Schools in India have been closed for the past, I think, 16 months. Despite of experts saying that the children are not going to be affected, schools are closed. As a result, child marriages, child labor. They are saying online classes are being conducted, but for whom? For the poor child of the village, which has maybe one smartphone in the home, which the head of the family needs for his daily use. How can you spare a smartphone for the education of the child for online lessons? All these things have been mishandled, and we are in a sorry state today, just with the second wave ending in most of the places. And now we do not know whether there will be a third wave. And in fact, the testing has been so bad that the number of antibody positive people seen as in last month in certain states is nearly 70% of the population. Though the tests have shown that maybe 1/10 of that have been infected. The number of reported deaths from COVID in certain states are 1 by 20th of the.
So thank you everyone for being here. In the Philippines, a survey conducted early this year found that 9 out of 10 Filipinos worried about the COVID-19 vaccine, with only 56% willing to get vaccinated. Even with a low uptake, vaccination rollouts have been very slow, and people who want to get vaccinated can't even get one. Many have criticized the lack of scientific leadership during the pandemic in the Philippines. Instead, the government has taken a militaristic approach to implement safety measures, with the president even threatening to jail or even shoot those in violation. In Metro Manila and other cities, quarantine lockdowns have been long and frequent. Hospitals are overwhelmed and full, with people dying because they can't get in. A lot of people couldn't work and therefore couldn't feed their families. The threat to shoot was also issued against protesters who were demanding food during one of several lockdowns. Although the government has a cash aid program for the poor, the distribution is inefficient and the amount is not enough. Not everyone is fortunate to have a work from home job or even the connectivity and equipment needed to apply for one. Children and families also struggle to get equipment for home education. The lockdown has exacerbated problems that have existed before the pandemic. Red tagging or labeling people as communists and even terrorists has extended to those criticizing the government's COVID response or even those simply doing socially helpful things that make the government look bad. The government's militaristic approach, initially justified by their violent campaign against illegal drugs, has been further justified by the need to keep people safe during the pandemic. Victims of domestic violence no longer have the relief of going outside. Humanists and non believers who are not out and are still living with family also find it tough to speak at home. These problems do happen in all kinds of households, but these situations are extremely difficult for the poor. While some may have even found themselves in better situations during the pandemic, the poor just get poorer with little hope on the horizon. Before the pandemic, Filipino Freethinkers has hosted online discussions on its online forums and social media. This made it easier for us to transition our face-to-face events, our meetups, into Zoom events, such as the recent Cafe Humanist. Other online initiatives that we've done or supported include the following: webinars to support online learning. We have Feminist Fridays, a webinar series and video podcast that discusses basic ideas and issues on feminism, and Sulong RH webinars, which are educational conversations around sexual and reproductive health and rights. We also have campaigns for rising cases of gender-based violence and domestic violence during the pandemic. We have Dear Survivor, a campaign to raise awareness and give support to to survivors of gender-based violence. We also have Share the Road with Her, as biking increased in popularity during the pandemic as both transportation and exercise. We collaborated on this campaign to raise awareness about the issues women bikers face. We also organized digital privacy and security workshops in response to the increased surveillance of activists and advocates during the pandemic. In general, we continued our work on various advocacy issues, often made more urgent due to the pandemic, such as women's rights, LGBT plus rights, SRHR, including access to safe and legal abortion. We also hosted online forums for evidence-based discussions related to the pandemic and did our part in the campaign against COVID-19 mis- and disinformation. Finally, we also helped our partner organizations who weren't used to organizing and hosting online events get used to the medium, get used to Zoom, and either through training or event support. So this pandemic challenges humanists to stand by their secular values. That's reason, science, human rights and human flourishing, compassion and cooperation, and many others. While this global challenge tends to foster fear, which leads to conservatism, close-mindedness, and bigotry, we must face this challenge with kindness. We must make sure our differences, whether we believe in science or pseudoscience or religion, does not become a permanent barrier to progress and cooperation. Instead, we can see this as an opportunity to educate with patience and understanding. If COVID-19 teaches us anything, it's that we're all in this together. By exercising our humanistic values, may we all survive this situation and come out the other side wiser, stronger, and in the meantime, may we all stay safe and strong. Thank you.
Hope that I'm audible, and yeah, it's a Saturday here. I would call it as a stress and depressed Saturday. So the situation outside is getting worse day by day because of the Delta variant. But I would have to say that Sri Lanka was one of the few countries that successfully controlled the first wave when it started in the March. And I can still remember when Giovanni from Humanist International contacted for translating those memes, educating people about COVID-19. And one of the memes says that if you have mild symptoms, stay home. But at that time, the Sri Lankan government was telling the people, even if you doubt of having a small symptom, call us. We are here to help you. Come to the hospital. Don't stay home. So this was the time that we were, felt safe, and our healthcare system was doing excellently. The government was telling the people, like, even if you have a small symptom, call us, and we are here to take care of you. And almost the country defeated the first wave. But when it comes to the second wave, yes, it was the same government was careless or overconfident about its capacities. And from that was the time the gate was opened for the devil. And now it's getting worse with the arrival of the Delta variant. But on the other hand, the vaccination program is going successfully. I would have to say, according to the government data, 260 vaccination centers and people over the age of 30 being vaccinated. Sinopharm, Moderna, AstraZeneca, Sputnik 5, and Pfizer are the vaccines being administered, but most of the people, or the bigger share of the vaccination is the contribution of Sinopharm. People over the age of 13 being vaccinated, and apart from the healthcare system, military, the armed forces are involved in quarantine facilities as well as the vaccination. And the government has deployed mobile vaccination for the people who are older age and unable to go to the vaccination centers. Yet the healthcare system is unable to cater the rising number of patients due to the Delta variant, and the hospitals in the Western province, where the capital of Sri Lanka is situated, is struggling, and other districts are also almost full, bed full of patients in the wards that allocated for COVID patients. While all these things are going on, the superstitious or unscientific, or whatever you call the pseudoscience, also took the center stage. One of the most disturbing view was the state health minister was throwing black magic pots from the bridges to the river with the hope of controlling COVID-19. This was the disappointing thing that we had to witness. Sri Lanka was once known as the most literated country in the world once upon a time, with a percentage of 85%. But now most of the countries have reached or overtaken that one, and Sri Lanka has also progressed with the free education and free healthcare system. But still, the health minister took such a step was unacceptable from such a country. So far, up to now, 350,000 positive cases, 5,500 deaths, and now the death has passed 100 deaths per day, and for the last 3 days, it has reached the number of 150. The healthcare system is struggling to cope with the upcoming newly found COVID patients, and there are accusations that the number of PCR tests being reduced in order to show the number of new patients in a low level. Military and healthcare workers doing their work beyond their limits, but luckily we do not have very much bigger anti-vaccine or anti-mask campaigns. But time to time, people claiming to be having solution for COVID from indigenous medicine are appearing from nowhere, and getting the media attraction is the disturbing scene once again. But the country or the people are able to defeat these things, and people are more enthusiastic to get the vaccination. And according to the military commander, 98% of the targeted crowd, that means the people over the age of 30, got the first shot of the vaccine, and 30% of the people have got both sort of the vaccines. Still, we are receiving more deaths and more new cases in Sri Lanka. Council of Ex-Muslims of Sri Lanka is concerned. It's an organization focused on those who left Islam and those who are willing to leave Islam. So the humanist ground in Sri Lanka is huge, and we really need another broader organization in Sri Lanka, and there were more attempts made and with my involvement. But as Dr. Richard Dawkins said in his book, God Delusion, that putting the leadership to the cats is a difficult task. The same story here in Sri Lanka being seen for the humanists, sadly. So the individual humanist enthusiasts such as Dr. Yaminda Jayaratne and Rohana Bagolla put a lot of efforts, but nothing got the fruits. But unfortunately, Rohana has left Sri Lanka, so he's no more living in Sri Lanka. So there's a need for a broader humanist organization exists in Sri Lanka. Humanist international support and the global humanist community support is expected, and Council of Ex-Muslims of Sri Lanka is ready to contribute for a broader organization, and we are always willing to do that one. And we all hear about the crisis in Afghanistan. So this is something escalating very fast, and I request the global humanist community to focus on this one and put this one on their priority list first. Well, in Sri Lanka also, we need a lot of support to change things. There are LGBTQ and women face discrimination. Even a female parliamentarian received verbal sexual abuses a few days back in the parliament while she was addressing the parliament. It was reported to the speaker. This was a sad situation, and LGBTQ community individuals being named, called, and all these shamings are still happening. It is a common thing, and people still not feel it is a wrong thing. So more education is needed. And as of I am speaking today, still the Sri Lankan school textbook for Islam contain a hadith from Bukhari. It says there are people who would leave Islam, and wherever you find them, kill them. Those who kill them will get benefit in the life after, in heaven. So this, the exact hadith is still being in the school textbooks and not removed as of I am talking with you. So, so these things have to be addressed in a broader way, because government is aware and reports are being submitted to the government, but no action being taken, and still the books are not being suspended. So this is a sad story, I have to say, and there are more things like extremist material in this. Well, the humanist and ex-Muslims are concerned in Sri Lanka. They say that the week has 7 days, but for us, every day is a gloomy Sunday. We go to sleep expecting the next day will be a sunny Monday, but yet we wake up in the afternoon to find it's another gloomy Sunday. Yes, I said we wake up in the afternoon. Insomnia and fear not let us sleep at night, and it takes our time. So we are depressed. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Vishnu. Thank you very much. Now, we've got plenty of questions coming in. There's one question which is from Monirul Islam, which is about whether or not we can set up some resources where people can submit their testimonies of persecution, and what initiatives we've done on an international level. I can just answer that one very quickly. Around 35% of the support provided to humanists at risk by Humanists International in 2020 was signposting and advice, and this is something that we are very active in doing. There are some resources available to help support people who are experiencing social discrimination, in many cases provided by our members on the ground, but also directly through us. And earlier this year, we actually submitted a major funding application from Humanists International, which, if successful, will help us develop a new range of training and resources for humanists around the world, which would include the type of resources that you're suggesting. So let's hope that that we will be able to to do that. One of the things that almost everyone just now mentioned in relation to the situation in their countries was the prominence and prevalence of pseudoscientific or superstitious or bogus remedies from different healers. And we've got a question from one participant here. Are there not laws, or have laws been used successfully in any of your countries against those people promoting bogus remedies? Narendra.
I'll answer that. In India, there is an act called as the Drugs and Magic Remedies Objectionable Advertisements Act, made in 1954 or 56, long back. And this act has got a list of diseases in which you cannot claim that anything cures these diseases. In that, there's cancer, blindness, sexually transmitted diseases, and so on. There's a list of them. About 25 diseases are there. In February 2020, another disease was added to this list, and that disease is COVID-19. So I was very happy when I saw that. I thought that the addition of this to the list of diseases for which you cannot claim to have a cure, and if you advertise that something can cure any of these in the list, you can be taken to, you can be criminally prosecuted.
And has that happened,
So
Narendra? Have there been prosecutions?
No, there have been prosecutions, but when it came to COVID and this so-called alternative medicine, they did not say it cures. Simple immunity boosters.
Right.
Those which are alternative and supportive medicine, that's the way they nicely get out of these things.
I see. And has anyone else in their country had experience of laws that or successful prosecutions of fake cures or misinformation?
No, let me now say something, that there have been prosecutions
So they have.
under this law. There have been. It's not that everyone managed to escape. Some people who claimed were prosecuted. And the cases are going on.
Okay, very good. It doesn't look like anybody else has got specific knowledge of this.
May I jump in quickly?
Yes, please do.
No, but the thing is, yes, I know this faith healing and all the superstitious practices are very bad, and they prevent people from going to like the real scientific way of treatment. But I think that the biggest problem in India, in Nepal, and many in other countries, shortage of like public hospitals in which people can have easy access. Imagine a situation in which people can have easy access to well-equipped, sophisticated, highly efficient hospital systems or healthcare system. Would they still be going to faith healer and all these kind of superstitious pseudoscience practices? So therefore, I personally think that the remedy lies primarily. I'm not saying that this fighting the faith healing system or superstition associated with the faith healing is not demanded, but what I'm emphasizing is the principal remedy lies in building a socialized healthcare system under government or a community ownerships, under ownership of different levels of government. Then this faith healing system would disappear, I think, gradually or maybe speedily.
That may be overly optimistic. I mean, for example, even in the UK, where there is a large socialized medical system, there are still prosecutions for fake cures and superstitious holy oils and so on. But I admire the humanist optimism of your point, which is good. Any other examples from different countries about this? Gulala, are you wanting to comment on this?
Yep. So I want to add that Pakistan has been trying to actually make a law to curb fake information and disinformation against the coronavirus through a new internet regulations. But actually, by looking a bit carefully at the new internet regulations, it is just another attempt to curb freedom of speech. And the human rights defenders, social media activists, political activists, and generally there is a huge fear and criticism in the country that these laws will not be used to curb disinformation, but will be used to curb voices of dissent. Like even like now there is a law, there is a cybercrime law in the country. But the cybercrime law, when the law was made, it was like made that this law is made to protect people against online harassment. But actually, the law is not used to protect people against online harassment. It is used to persecute those people who speak for human rights. So people in Pakistan, especially activists, they do not trust the government. They do not trust that any such law will actually protect people from fake information. They believe that it will prevent free speech.
It is actually the same thing in Bangladesh too. The Digital Act law that we talked about, Andrew, in last 5 years so much, they changed it and because of all the criticism. But then they came up with another one, which is like more draconian than even the last one. So if those kind of laws are used to suppress freedom of expression, mainly, they're more worried about freedom of speech than suppressing this kind of misinformation or anti-scientific stuff. Because if you see Bangla Online, which we are trying to fight, it is full of misinformation, religious explanation of everything, and like there is nobody cares about the facts there. The government will intervene when only it comes to their interest or suppress freedom of expression.
Does anyone else have, I mean, this is not something we've been asked a question about, but it's an interesting theme that's been opened up. Are there other examples from other countries of governments taking this opportunity to implement more draconian controls on people's lives in different ways? I don't know whether from Sri Lanka or from the Philippines there are such examples.
Andrew, if I may, I don't know if you might have a list of questions.
No, you can carry on.
I have her from Philippines. I have been very curious. Is she still here?
Yes, Christine is here, yeah.
Okay, so when we have launched like 50 some videos in Bangla, but English we have done very limited because of resources, and also there is so much in English. But Imtiaz, who my co-founder for Thing, his videos, couple of first videos went viral. And he keeps saying that it's the viewers from Philippines. There are tons of viewers from Philippines. It's very strange.
Very encouraging.
Yes, and I keep talking about it. So is there a need for that kind of like content in Philippines? And do a lot of people speak in English there?
Yeah, so a lot of people speak English, and a lot of people are online in the Philippines. So we're a social media country, and there's a lot of disinformation that we have to fight as well. So it's nice that people are finding your videos.
I would actually like to share. I would like to talk to everybody later, like on a different forum. Maybe I will talk to Giovanni about it.
That's a great idea.
Up the videos for other languages.
I'm sure that we can help with that, and Giovanni is the right person to speak to. That's fantastic. Narendra, your hand is up, I think, perhaps to talk about draconian government actions. Just have to unmute yourself there. Yeah.
Yes, you had muted me. Anyway, the ruling right-wing Hindutva party in power in this center took this opportunity of this pandemic to destabilize and remove a lot of governments in the states which were of the opposition parties. And dissent could not be expressed because of this distancing and all these norms, and they could ask for a curfew. Once they do the task of removing a government to prevent the protest, they would say there's a lockdown or a curfew or a shutdown or something like that. So this is the way the ruling party took advantage of that. And again, the Prime Minister started a fund called as Prime Minister Cares Fund, which was not accountable to anyone. So the ruling party has taken full advantage of this situation of the pandemic in every single way. This is what I wanted to say.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen this very, very much from the Humanist International point of view in so many countries around the world, that governments have taken the opportunity of lockdowns and restrictive measures to increase their persecution of minorities, but also their control over the everyday lives of citizens in various ways. And of course, it is minorities, whether it's humanists or religious minorities, LGBT people, women or girls, who suffer the most from this political control. I wonder if anyone on the panel has other examples or ways in which you hope to perhaps challenge some of these restrictions in the future, or to make sure that when pandemic restrictions have eased, we can try and restart that work for civil liberties. I don't know whether you do. If you don't, I'll go to another question. That's fine.
For the Philippines, I think
Yes.
what we try to do is we try to capacitate activists and advocates in order to build up their security so that they can speak out more.
Sri Lanka is concerned.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, the protest and trade union actions were oppressed by the police, and because of the quarantine law, pandemic situation. At the same time, even you talk about the minorities, there are minorities who would like to, who prefer their dead bodies to be buried rather than cremated, especially Muslims and some sects of Christians, and even some individuals from other religious community. But when the pandemic started, March 2020, and the burial of the bodies banned in Sri Lanka, the pseudoscience came into play, and the reports came that the virus can condemn into the groundwater, and the water can come into the usage of the people, and it can infect the people. So it was not proved, but the government appointed committees and after committee to study this case, and it dragged a long time, unnecessary dragging, and it took a long time for them to come to a conclusion. And few months back only, they decided to bury the body. That was also a special place in the country. Only one designated place was selected, and where the bodies would be buried. And now I guess almost 2,000 bodies, nearly 2,000 bodies being buried. But it took a long time to take a decision in this one. While the other countries in the world were doing this one, that pseudoscience and some unreliable reports kept on propagating that the dead bodies can make the virus contaminated with the water.
Yeah. And do you think there are opportunities, Rizwan, after these, as these pandemic measures ease, to push even harder, as it were, for greater civil liberties and freedom for minorities? Is there an opportunity in a way to do that, or is it doesn't make any difference?
Well, it doesn't make any difference because now the whole country is affected. But in the previous stages, once upon a time, there were accusations on Muslims that they were spreading the virus, and at the time, unfortunately, we had a very few number of infected people, like you can point out with your fingers. But when you're counting with your fingers, that few, like most of them were Muslims, unfortunately. But it helped carried out a campaign that Muslims were spreading. But to be honest, even though I am an ex-Muslim, that masjids they came forward, and they closed even before the government told them to close it in the recent week. In district like Kandy and Kurunegala, they themselves decided we are not going to have any prayers, so we are closed.
Right.
Still, the government allowed it, but they didn't.
And Gulalai, are there any lessons that you've learned from the pandemic, you think, with the work of Aware Girls that you referred to, that will continue from now on? I mean, are there any permanent changes as a result of these incidents, that you think will actually be beneficial?
With the pandemic, one of the things that we have learned is that how we can effectively use internet to advocate and to lobby, and also how to use social media spaces more effectively to advocate and to lobby And the other thing which I also initially mentioned is that how with the pandemic there has been really less attention on the situation of the human rights defenders. and especially those human rights defenders who are in exile. There are continuously new reports are coming out that how Pakistani state agencies are maintaining kill lists, both of activists who are living in exile and activists who are living in Pakistan. So one of the key takeaway for us at Aware Girls is to continue bringing world's attention to the situation of human rights defenders in Pakistan and in South Asia. Recently, it was a few months ago, the ex-Taliban leader, the ex-Taliban spokesperson, Ahsanullah Ahsan, he published an article in which he mentioned that when he was in the custody of Pakistan intelligence agencies, he was given a list of people and he was asked to kill them. The list included my name as well, along with other 9 prominent political activists from Pakistan. And now, a few weeks ago, I have come to know from other sources that Pakistan maintains a list with the name of hostile elements, which has name of activists living in Pakistan and abroad. And the plan is to neutralize them, that is to kill them. So one thing that that is important for me and that we will continue to do is to bring world's attention to what is happening to humanists, what is happening to human rights defenders, and how we can better protect them, and how countries like Pakistan are using anti-terrorism laws, how they are using cybercrime laws to curb dissent, to curb voices of humanists and to curb voices of human rights defenders, instead of actually using these laws to curb terrorism.
Thank you. Well, that brings our panel, our Asian Humanism panel, to an end. Thank you, Gulalai from Pakistan, Bonya from Bangladesh, Dr. Prasai from Nepal, Narendra from India, Christine from the Philippines, and Rishvin from Sri Lanka. It's been wonderful to have your contributions. We look forward to hearing from you again and to continuing to work with you in our global humanist movement.